Shalom and welcome to 2 Minutes of Torah. This year's entitled Parshat Noach. Did the flood affect Eretz Yisrael? Ramban in Parshat Noach, Perek Chet, 8th chapter, discusses this very question. Did the flood only affect the rest of the world, or no, affected Israel as well? And if so, was it exactly like the rest of the world or not? So Ramban questions this point when he analyzes the pasuk in Perek Chet, where it says that the Yonah found an olive branch. Where did the Yonah get an olive branch from? Even if the flood stopped, and that time was needed for the branch, for the tree to grow. So it brings down a medrash that says maybe Gan Eden was closed off and did not. The flood didn't affect it at all. He doesn't embrace that approach, and he says maybe the flood didn't affect Israel at all. And he says, "What, was there a wall surrounding Israel? The water could not get into Israel?" So he says, maybe the flood did affect Israel. So then, of course, the question comes back, well, where are the trees from? He said, well, there's another possibility, that the heavens opened up with all the rain, and so too Mayanot, the wells from under the ground as well, opened up in all places in the world except for Israel. In Israel, that did not happen, but the water naturally flowed into Israel. So he said there was damage there. People may have been killed there. But the trees were able to withstand that level of water, while no trees around the world were able to withstand the flood itself when it came down directly on them. But if it was just water that came from other places, then the trees were able to stand. That's what the Ramban says. So it turns out the flood affected and didn't affect Israel, meaning it did not start, it did not occur in Israel, but it affected the waters flowed. According to Tosfos, in Zevachim, actually, there was no flood whatsoever in Israel. Maybe certain changes in the atmosphere that might have affected and killed the people, but there was no water, didn't originate in Israel and didn't flow into Israel as well. Some kind of miraculous protection. But both agree there was some special hashgacha, providence, where the rest of the world was affected in a much more dramatic way than Israel. The question is why? So it's understandable to say that now the Jewish nation is home. Baruch Hashem, we clearly see, or we should all clearly see, divine providence of the Jewish nation in Eretz Israel today. But the Jewish nation in Am Yisrael wasn't even on the scene 5,000 years ago at the time of the Mabul. And still there's a special hashgacha. So apparently there is a special divine providence over Israel even before the Jewish nation is on the scene. In the beginning of Harot, it seems from Rav Kook, he holds that there's a special hashgacha in Eretz Yisrael separate from Am Yisrael. Or one can maintain that the land of Israel is chosen for the Jewish nation, so therefore from the very beginning there is a special providence. Either way, there seems to be a special hashgacha in Eretz Yisrael over the land of Israel, and we had that at the beginning with this Parsha. And then by the time the Meraglim came into Israel, it was obvious as well. We had fruits that grew in such a magnificent manner, not like any other fruits. And of course, once the Jews are in Israel, there was a special hashgacha, providence for the Jewish people. And what's fascinating is, even when we were exiled, there was a special hashgacha. According to the laws of nature, if we're not in the land of Israel, other nations should be able to come in and grow, harvest the land, and have crops like anywhere else in the world. And yet we know the land was desolate, as Mark Twain said. The land was a wasteland in the late 1800s. And that's exactly what the Torah predicted in Bechukotai, that we will be kicked out. The land will remain loyal, meaning there's a special divine providence over Israel. And now that we've come back again, somehow we've come from a desert, from swamps, to one of the most magnificent places in the world, agriculturally, militarily, economically, and of course, spiritually. And that's, of course, with man's effort and Hashem's blessings. So we see there is an incredible level of divine providence in Israel that does not exist anywhere else. And this providence existed from the beginning of time. It existed before we entered Israel. It existed when we were in Israel. It existed when we were kicked out of Israel. And now it exists again, Baruch Hashem, we've returned. If one reads Rav Goren's autobiography, his early years, about a century ago, early 1900s, when he first came into Israel, and it was desolate, swamps, malaria. And he lived through the period where the Jews were going ahead and working to make the land bloom, which of course, that's exactly what happened. So it's amazing within our generation, there were people that just saw and lived through the transition from the swamps, from the malaria, to this beautiful green country that we have today that is flourishing in every possible way, in all the physical ways, and of course, in the spiritual as well. And Amir Hashem, we should continue to flourish and continue to merit the constant divine providence. Shalom.